Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we'll have the latest from the live radar, run for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. As you've probably guessed, the sunny, dry and generally warm conditions are going to last the rest of this week. However, the end is now in sight. Come this weekend and especially into the start of next week, it will be turning much more unsettled as the high pressure starts to move away. We're already seeing rumblings of this on the latest UKV come day 5, but it's really day 6, day 7, day 8 as we head towards Sunday, Monday next, or the end of this week into next week. That's where things start to break down, and we are looking at potentially some really unsettled conditions. We can have a look at those potentially unsettled conditions on the latest GFS, GM and ECMWF, all with slightly different scenarios that would have slightly different outcomes, especially in terms of temperature and exact intensity of precipitation, where there'll be any thunderstorms. But generally speaking, they are all in agreement that it is going to go much more unsettled towards the middle of April and could last through to the second half of April as well. So it could be really a month of two halves. Dry and warm in the first half, potentially unsettled, maybe even pretty cold into the second half of the month. But of course, we'll have a look at that in detail in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, to like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if we start on the live radar, as expected, dry and clear skies at the moment. Not a cloud in the sky for many, and no precipitation at all in Western Europe. You can see where we have got low pressure across Eastern Europe. We've got some remnants of rain and even some snow where we have seen a trough coming out of the Arctic. And you can see this more defined on the latest temperatures. Very cold across Eastern Europe, but across Western Europe still very mild. And you can see the warmest areas across the British Isles have been western parts of England, Wales, and most interestingly, actually western parts of the Republic of Ireland. And this is because of the positioning of the high, we have got a slight easterly flow. And simply speaking, this area of the Republic of Ireland is furthest away from the cold North Sea, essentially negating those impacts and not really seeing any of the lower cloud or any of those slightly colder temperatures pushing in. And the opposite end, you can see for much of eastern England, it is colder here. Again, it's still pleasant, still lots of sunshine and blue skies, but just a little bit more of a chill in the air, and it does progressively get warmer the further westward you go. Again, a pretty typical high pressure pattern for this time of year, when we've still got very cold sea surface temperatures in the North Sea. This sort of pattern is going to continue for the rest of the week. Could even get quite warm towards the end of the week. 21, 22, even 23 degrees is possible before it does turn unsettled and cooler as we head into the weekend and start of next week. Now, to start on the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation charts. Now, generally speaking, over the past week or two, we've skimmed through this very quickly because there's really not been much to look at. However, things are starting to appear at the extremity of this run. Generally speaking, again, the next few days, really not much to talk about. Bits and bobs of cloud around, but generally speaking, pretty dry and sunny. Well, completely dry and sunny, not pretty dry. There is no precipitation in the forecast for the next 3 or 4 days. A bit of thicker cloud there through Wednesday. Again, in the Far East, could hold those temperatures down a little bit. And into Thursday, you can start to see precipitation arriving from the northwest. Low pressure slowly heading our way, becoming a little bit more intense and more widespread through to Friday. This will slowly push south and eastwards. It takes a really long time here, hardly moves in about 24 or 36 hours, but it is slowly squeezing the high pressure away. And through the weekend into Monday, that is when we expect these weather fronts to fully push through, and we're all into fresher, more unsettled conditions. Doesn't mean we're going to see washout conditions. There'll still be plenty of sunny and dry weather around. It just won't be as stable. There will be showers around. There will be longer spells of rain, specifically into the middle of next week, where it could be really quite horrible indeed. And generally, temperatures a lot more up and down, a lot less predictable. It's been very, very easy to forecast the last couple of weeks. Dry and warm, blue skies has been on the menu, but that will all be changing come the end of this week. And you can see if we put on the pressure charts here, you can see the lower pressure to our northwest squeezing the high pressure away. It's a very slow transition, but it is a transition nonetheless. And it does mean that by the end of the weekend, start of next week, it will be a lot more unsettled. Now, do look at the max temperatures. See this afternoon, widely into the mid-teens, maybe high teens, especially in the west. So a warm day, but nothing too spectacular. Into Tuesday, a cold morning. We're seeing frosts in quite a few areas with clearer skies. And into Tuesday afternoon, similar temperatures, maybe slightly higher, mid to high teens. As we progress into Wednesday, again, a chilly morning, and by the afternoon, once again, temperatures up towards those mid to high teens. Far east still, though, much cooler. Thursday, similar story, perhaps temperatures slightly higher here, 18 to even 20 degrees for some, and much warmer towards those eastern coasts. And this is because the high pressure is already getting pushed southwards and eastwards. So those areas that have seen that easterly flow actually lose that easterly flow. That's why it could become even warmer later on this week, because the centre of the high drifts eastwards. And that means that, as I said, we cut off the easterly wind. So for all, it'll be a bit stiller and it'll be warmer. And we see this exemplified here. On to Friday, look at that, temperatures all the way towards the 20 to 22 degree mark there come Friday. But it will be turning cooler and, as I said, more unsettled as we head towards that 13th, 14th, 15th of April. That's still the point we're expecting to see the breakdown. Now, if you look at the latest GFS, see the high pressure is right over the top of us at the moment. No signs of a breakdown coming, but it very quickly starts to develop over the coming day. The high pressure eventually drifting southwards and eastwards, and by Saturday, we're starting to see that transition. The high pressure is losing its strength, being pushed eastwards, and you can see by the 13th, 14th, we're all under lower pressure. Not particularly deep low pressure, not particularly tight isobars, so it's not going to be a quick change to something really quite horrible. Be very slow, of course, for a number of days, because he's slowly into next week. Look at this, low pressure systems driving southwards, tighter isobars, lower pressure, and this is where it could be very unsettled indeed. Real cut-off low developing there, where the general jet stream gets cut off here with this high pressure reforming towards Greenland. This could also cause it to go very cold as well. Northeasterly winds arriving here into the final third of April, really quite chilly and unsettled with a southerly tracking jet stream. See, the -5 isotherm does push in for a time, so it turns very cold, potentially overnight frosts. And again, if we do zoom in, we would be looking at quite a widespread array of showers, and the temperatures, look at that, widely down to freezing overnight, and by day, hardly getting above 7 or 8 degrees. So I can't emphasize enough, there is a risk that we could see a complete reversal of the first week or two of April, and it could be, well below average instead of well above average, and it could be very unsettled as well. Fortunately, in a cold northerly wind like this, we wouldn't expect as much precipitation because there is a lot of dry air around, symbolized by the lower dew points. But if we have a look at the scenarios in a minute from the GEM and the ECMWF that don't quite have as much cold air in place, they are very unsettled and really quite horrible indeed. Now, if you look at the GEM, very similar in terms of bringing low pressure in, but it does it in a slightly different way. Now again, high pressure getting pushed away to the south and the east over the coming days. Eventually low pressure pushing in, but again, like the GFS, it takes its time. Really by next Monday, Tuesday, unsettled conditions fully push in. And see, there is some high pressure blocking to our north, which is causing the jet stream to shift southwards, but no North Atlantic ridge, no Greenland high. So instead of a northerly wind, it is a westerly wind, so there would be mild air involved, but you see the big temperature clashes, and that would mean big, beefy weather fronts, long spells of rain, washout conditions potentially later on into next week, and that would not be ideal. You see big low pressure system, warm air feeding in from the south, cold air feeding in from the north, and yeah, it could be bringing us back to classic unsettled, big, beefy low pressure systems. Now the ECMWF is very similar, but again, does it in a slightly different way. Again, the high pressure gets pushed to our south and our east, low pressure replaces it, very slowly transitioning, very similar out towards kind of day 8 there, but look what happens. We do see high pressure moving towards Greenland and Iceland, but instead of penetrating into the Arctic and producing northeasterly winds, the high pressure is still there across Eastern Europe, and this eventually leads us to seeing easterly winds with a cut-off low to our south. But most importantly, look at all this warm air to our east feeding in off the North Sea. Now this big clash of air masses means one thing: the low pressure would deepen, it would get a bit more severe, winds would pick up, but also could be some exceptionally heavy rain, where this very warm air collides with this very cold air. Lots of moisture and humidity within this warm push. As I said, that could produce potentially very up and down temperatures, but also an awful amount of cloud and rain as possible in a scenario like this. Picking up air all the way from the Mediterranean within this low pressure system, it really could be absolutely horrific. Could be washout conditions here. I can't emphasize that enough. So you can see the latest 3 runs, all producing something more unsettled, all producing a lot more volatility in terms of temperatures, but all doing it slightly different. So the overall theme of something more unsettled, potentially cooler, is definitely there within all 3 runs. They all do it in slightly different time frames and different severities, which is something we do need to pinpoint. As I said, it could really change the outcome quite significantly. Now, to finish by looking at the latest Ensemble, see the latest GFS. Generally warm over the next week, a little dip in the next day or so, but by the end of the week, much, much warmer. But into early next week, you can see the upper air temperature dip back towards average, and then hovering slightly above and slightly below for the foreseeable future. But more importantly, look at those precipitation spikes, very high indeed, and you can see them really picking up around the 13th, 14th, and staying pretty high there throughout the rest of April. They've increased a little bit since yesterday, so definitely increased chances here of something very unsettled, and yeah, with up and down temperatures. So more typical of a more wintry to spring transition and this sudden change to warmth that we have had through March and April. So it does look like we are going to be bringing back those unsettled conditions. It doesn't look like we've just gone very quickly to summer like it has felt like the last couple of weeks. It was always going to backtrack, and that's exactly what we're seeing, bring us back towards something colder, but also very unsettled, making up for all of that dry conditions we've seen over the past few weeks. Again, will all depend on the exact scenario that does develop, but it does look like there will be a lot more in the way of widespread rain into next week. Now, to follow up with the latest ECMOF, unfortunately the midday run hasn't fully come out yet, but if we look at the midnight, very, very similar, pretty warm over the next week, towards the next weekend into the start of the following week, but then generally upper air temperatures drop back towards average, still above average though. I have to look at that, but precipitation is fairly high. So unsettled, rainy conditions, as I said, look like they could dominate as we do head into the second half of the month. So the end is now in sight, pretty much confirmed come next weekend, Saturday, Sunday in the north and west, probably by Monday for the far southeast. It will be turning a lot more unsettled and most likely cooler. So do cherish the next 4 or 5 days. Temperatures will get warmer as we progress through this week. Could be summer-like come Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but as I said, very quick transition to something cooler progressively over the weekend. Generally speaking, it will be a slow transition in terms of the pressure levels, but Saturday could be a very pleasant day in the southeast, but by Sunday, it could be a bit more miserable with cloud and rain moving in. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on it, and of course we'll continue to update you on those details, but that's the rough time frame we are looking at, and the rest of April at the moment hasn't got particularly positive signals. It does look very unsettled and could be very horrible indeed. Washout conditions are a possibility if we go by runs like the ECMOF, but it is still too far away to pinpoint those details. As I said, we'll keep you updated on those longer range charts as well. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.